Hey there, thanks for joining us at the Rabbit Hole of Research, where you'll learn a few facts that you can impress your friends with at a party. Hey, welcome back to the Rabbit Hole of Research. Down here in the basement studio, you have me, Joe. You got
Nick.
We got Nick here, and we have another special guest here joining us on the Rabbit Hole of Research. Will you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Natalie. I'm here to talk about Godzilla. I will say up front, I am a fan, not necessarily an expert, but I have...
You've got like signs, you got books.
I do.
You've come more prepared than I ever have.
You've read books in Italian on Godzilla?
One,
I don't
yep.
know. Mm-hmm. That sounds... You're pushing expert a little bit there. Super fan. How about that? So
definitely a super fan.
We have a super fan here with us.
You're like one step away from writing your own Godzilla film, right?
That's right.
I don't...
Yes. So that's right. We're going to talk about and everything. Kaiju. And that. I'll just jump in with my definition. Right? That's where we started. So I'll just define Kaiju. It's a Japanese term that translates to strange beast or monster. It specifically refers to giant monsters in Japanese cinema and pop culture, often depicted as massive creatures that pose a threat to human civilization. The term gained widespread recognition through the kaiju genre films, particularly with the release of Godzilla in 1954. You had spin-offs from that. These creatures can be antagonistic forces of destruction, or in some cases, protectors of the earth. The genre is known for its large-scale battles, urban destruction, and underlying allegorical themes, often reflecting social and environmental anxieties, such as nuclear warfare, environmental collapse, or technological hubris. I figured a good place to start.
I think so. I think I could add a couple more qualifiers.
Please do. Show us your expert level.
I think it is generally Asian or significantly Asian influenced, and there can be debates about that, but that's clearly where it resides. And the animals are strange, right? You said strange beasts, but like a fish out of water. And they often destroy by bumbling around. It's not like a...
Right.
It's not malicious.
Right.
Yeah.
They're like, what's happening? Yeah. Why are you...
Almost feels comical in some ways, like with some of the...
Especially in the early movies.
Right. You have it, and I was watching Godzilla versus Ghidorah. And you have that scene where they're throwing the rocks at each other. It feels like it's Three Stooges. Like they're just going like a slapstick kind of comedy routine. And then you got, I forget the little worm thing that spits the string all over them and pulls them out. It's like
the baby Mothras.
Right, yeah, we got to chill out. We got to fight Ghidorah here. What are we doing? No, it's a very interesting thing. So,
and I would say one other thing is that in the genre, there's an avoidance of human gore or body horror, which tends to keep the focus on the societal issues that they're bringing to the front with this strange beast.
Right.
There's not a lot of gore in this genre.
Yeah, that's true. Another thing,
I did notice that. Yeah, that was one thing where you don't really see people getting splushed. You see them, they're not there
or they're
anymore.
Flung.
Eaten.
Whole.
Yeah. Like you're not getting cut in half where it could be like super gory if they really wanted it to. But...
Yeah, I was going to say that you mentioned mostly Japanese in nature, but I think it's also spread out, right? And it's now internationally, like Cloverfield or movies like that. Historically, King Kong would have been the inspiration for...
King Kong came first.
Right, that's right, yeah.
And King Kong was more American.
It was 100% American, right? In history, you had King Kong 1933. Before that was The Lost World, 1925. Which it was a stop motion, and the Japanese filmmakers was inspired by that technique. So these were these early pre-war giant monster movies that was there. And a Lost World was a silent film. And actually, I did watch that. It was really, it's actually a good movie. I was like, oh, it's going to be cheesy, but it was interesting to see it and have that set up. So that was the idea. And Godzilla was in response to the aftermath of World War II and the detonation of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
and testing at
And the
Bikini
testing, that's
Atoll.
right, at the Bikini Atoll. That's right. The Lucky Dragon, number 5 incident.
So many things there. But it reminds me of when I was in college and I was taking French, and I got to a point where I could take a French literature course. These were like really easy little short stories, but they were all so freaking weird because it was all this post-World War II fiction, and it was just surreal. It was a very weird way, I thought, to teach a language because the words weren't obvious. Maybe that was the point. I don't know. But my takeaway is that World War II really messed up a lot of people.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So Godzilla is a metaphor. Godzilla is also a trauma response, like a collective trauma response.
Yep.
And a way to deal with it in metaphor without having a direct conversation that maybe they couldn't at the time. Because after World War II, the U.S. occupied Japan.
That's right.
There was a lot of censorship.
Yep.
And then also there is just a societal not wanting to talk about these horrible things that were too horrible to talk about.
Yeah, it's a more polite way. You put it through art, so people talk about the art with their feelings of what happened in the current events.
And I think we've touched on this in other episodes that, and one could almost think of Godzilla, it came out in 1954 as a horror movie. And we talk here that horror is a way to explore pain and angst in a safe space where you don't have to be explicit about it. We all know, we get it. And then it's, these are the warnings. This is like, these are things to avoid. And you had that in there. So we don't think of it as a horror movie because it lacks, like you were saying, Natalie, the gore and things like that. But really, if you think about what they were talking about, the allegory of the movie and some fearfulness of atomic fallout and radiation, what can happen in human hubris using tampering with this kind of power. It was, if you watch the movie in that light, it becomes a little different. And I will say, it wasn't without controversy. One of the things I found, I didn't know, was that Harryhausen, I can say his last name, very famous stop motion animator in American cinematography, he actually claimed that Godzilla was a ripoff of his movie, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, that came out in 1953. And it was a very similar creature. It was a giant dinosaur-like creature with radioactive breath and abilities, and it was destroying cities and things like that. And the original script of Godzilla was actually very similar to that. And then they said, let's change it up. And they made changes. So it was this kind of a riff there that this movie was lifted off. So we give credit to this starting in Japan, but I think it was like some pushback. No, this actually was this started in America and then it was copied there. So I just thought I'd throw that out. A little bit of this trivia I found when I was digging around. It was like, that's interesting. I didn't know that the movies, how close they came out to each other.
Right.
And things like that.
Was it any good though?
Yeah, it was a good movie. It's Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Never seen it.
It's a pretty good movie. The stop motion animation is really good. It's solid. It's a good, in terms of American cinema, I think it's on lists. So go watch it. Double Indemnity and The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Sorry, that was a callback to
I was going to go back
episode.
to Bikini Atoll.
Yeah, please do. No, that was a fascinating incident.
So the question I came up with was, are Godzilla and SpongeBob siblings? And I think so.
I was thinking that as well.
I think yes, because the U.S. did this testing in the Pacific, this island. And I mean, it was like a game of Battleship with nuclear bombs. They took all of these decommissioned ships and anchored them because the atoll is like a circle, an island in the middle. They painted them orange so that they could see where to aim the bombs. And then they dropped. The first one they dropped from above, and then the second explosion from below. It was under the water because they wanted to see what happens to ships when you detonate a nuclear bomb under them. So SpongeBob is in Bikini Bottom, which is presumably under Bikini Atoll. And they're so much like Godzilla.
So they're like cousins then.
Or were they just created by the same event. Right,
which also is why we have the bathing suit, the bikini, at least the name bikini.
Oh, really?
Two-piece bathing suits have been around for thousands of years.
Is it because one was on top, one was on bottom?
Oh, No.
What
that's
are you
good.
talking about, man?
Because one was dropped on top.
I don't
No,
One
I think
and
there
a
were
bikini.
two different.
Do you not know? I think we have to explain what a bikini is, Joe.
I know what a bikini is, people.
There were two French fashion designers who both were making this type of bathing suit, and it was very scandalous here at the time in 46. And one of them introduced his as a bikini 5 days he had a press conference 5 days after the first testing there.
Yeah.
Because his bathing suit was going to be as big as an atomic bomb. Right.
He wasn't wrong.
He wasn't, no.
The other one called his atom because it was as small as a bathing suit could be, like an atom.
Right.
Small.
Was it really?
I think it's...
How small was the at-home suit?
It looked like a regular bikini.
I didn't realize that bikini was like a brand name, like you would say Kleenex.
Right, yeah. Or Pampers. Or,
Yeah.
you got all these, that now this becomes.
Yeah, it was a brand.
Q-tips and...
So it was just called a bathing suit before that.
Or two-piece,
Or
I don't know.
two-piece, right. We don't know what they...
But I don't think they were wildly popular in Western culture before that.
Because of all the Puritan rules
Right, yes.
here in America.
But
Too much ankle there, Joe.
Yes.
the first
Wait
bombing
till we get video in this place. Go for it, sorry.
was in 1946, and it was called Operation Crossroads. And it actually shows that first or the second detonation, because the second detonation is the one that had the Wilson cloud. They put it in Godzilla Minus One.
Yes,
It's
I
in
saw
there,
that.
and it's labeled Operation Crossroads.
Right. That's really cool. Yeah. Cool,
So that's definitely
a callback to that.
callback.
Because that was set in
Yes.
post World War II. That was the idea there. And that was still a time in military history that we were testing how atomic bombs work, their destructive power and capabilities. And you can imagine from the top and the bottom, one is how would you launch from submarines, things like that, like these maritime kind of attacks using nuclear warheads. So that was probably the proto. They were still doing a lot of, even on American soil. I think they were moving it from America in the Southwest to somewhere else.
They did some horrible things.
They did.
People lived on Bikini Atoll. They got relocated to other places, and they were told they could come back home later, but that was not true because home was ruined,
And
radioactive.
And like the tuna that they were like from the waters, like a lot of this testing was secret, and
It was.
how radiation affects people was still being explored. So when America sent doctors and things over to help, they were really taking samples back to study. It wasn't a humanitarian effort. It was actually a research effort to go over, collect samples, and come back.
So all those battleships they had anchored,
right.
they put animals on them. Goats and I don't remember, pigs.
Lizards.
Yeah.
And most all of them died.
Right. I mean, that's
horrifically.
right. Yeah.
And when that eventually came out, there was more outcry over the animals than over
And the
the
people.
dropping of the bombs.
Wait, so you're telling me that these animals didn't get powers?
No, they didn't.
What if I got
turn
bit
into-
by one? Will I get powers?
No,
I don't think there were any powers.
You probably would die pretty fast because they're probably fairly hot. And it's just going Yes, yeah.
So in 1954, they did the whole thing again, Operation Castle. And
Interesting.
that is what you were talking about, the Lucky Dragon
Lucky
5.
Dragon 5. Okay, so they were, they were the two
So
separate incidences. I
They
see.
two separate testings, but same place.
Right.
And
So that was a ship where
So this
the
was a
radio operator
tuna
got sick and Okay. Yeah.
fishing
Yep,
boat,
yep.
crew of 23. And the U.S. didn't know the fallout was going to be that big.
Right. That's
They
right.
had cleared some area of ocean, but they had not cleared enough. And also, I think the wind was blowing a different direction. And this ship just had all this powder falling on it. And they didn't know what it was. They did not know what it was, but there were 23 men on there. Eventually, they all died of cancer. One of them died right away, and then others.
Soon after.
And
Yeah. And they were testing hydrogen bombs. I think that's why they didn't know. It was the first of their kind.
yes,
Yeah, the other thing people usually forget is that Japan is the only country to have had nuclear weapons used on it in war.
An attack.
And America is the only country to have used nuclear weapons in a military situation or any situation. I don't think any's been Hopefully, knock on wood, we don't.
As of this recording.
Yes, as of this recording. Yeah, no. So that's all that history kind of builds up to exploring that trauma in
You have to think they had the bombs dropped in Japan.
Right. And as you're recovering, then almost
then
10 years later, right? Yeah.
Still
right.
in your backyard, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
But there's a reason all the Godzilla movies, they almost all have some kind of fishing boat in them.
Right.
And Lucky Dragon #5 is actually on display in a museum setting in Japan.
Wow.
You can visit it. The ship is
That's right.
on land.
Damn. Yeah. Like it would have sunk by now if it wasn't.
Yeah.
One disturbing thing I found is that the Godzilla's skin, how it's all bumpy, it's meant to recall the keloid scar tissue that was on people who were in Nagasaki or Hiroshima.
Oh,
it's
shit.
like a collagen scar
Right.
from the burns from the
burns,
bomb.
Right. I will say on it, I actually had the opportunity to go to the Hiroshima Peace Park in Japan. And so you see a lot of the famous images. So there's a bridge there and then a river bed. And that was from the air, that was a convenient target to drop the bomb. And so then the Peace Park is there, and there's a bank building that used to be there, concrete and iron building. And so the pictures that they show, that building's like just on this kind of desolated, wiped out landscape. And there's this kind of building, a little iron skeletal dome sitting there. So that building is still in the Peace Park. You go and it's still there and you can see it. So it was one of the most sobering experiences walking through there. And they have pictures, historical pictures of what it looked like. They laid all the bodies out by this river and had them there. And it was really like, yeah, it's a fairly sobering thing of what these weapons can do. And that was a fairly small, in comparison to today's nuclear armament, they were relatively small in destructive capability. So just to touch on that a little bit, but I'll throw some pictures of that trip in there because it is an interesting in the show notes. There it is in the quiet
show notes.
To spin us back, I think a little bit, it's how you would get a creature the size. What's the biology? Because I'm a biologist. This season, I want to talk biology because I am a biologist. So
is that what you are?
I always try to talk about physics stuff, and I'm not a physicist, so I get in the quantum conversation.
I thought you were a chemist.
I am not a chemist.
No? Man.
I don't even play one on TV. I'm a minor in chemistry, but I am not a chemist, no. But yeah, so I think it is just really interesting to have a creature that large and how it would move. And some of the mechanics is always interesting because the way it seems to be in the water, how it rises, or walking across land. It's a huge creature. And so when it has that run or the little jaunty jogs, like it depends on the movie. Like some he's meandering slowly as you would expect, and others it's like this kind of little trot, like running around making the Godzilla noise. And I'm not going to. I don't think it's that.
No, I'm pretty sure that's exactly.
That sounds like a sick Chewbacca.
Do you know what the sound actually is? It was produced by rubbing a pine tar resin coated glove along the string of a contrabass and then slowing down the playback.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is. I can hear it.
That's pretty cool.
After I read that, I was like, oh, yeah, that tracks.
I love foliage. What is that? What it? Foley artists.
Foley, yeah, the Foley.
Oh, yeah.
Those things are so cool.
Yeah.
But back to Godzilla's height, it changes.
Right. It does, yep.
From movie to movie. Yeah. And sometimes it changes within the same movie. But one thing that made Godzilla get taller as time went on was that the buildings in Tokyo got taller.
Yeah,
and he needed to tower over.
Destroy buildings. You can't be smaller in a building.
Right.
Yes. And bigger. I mean, he's jacked in the Godzilla versus King Kong.
Oh,
I mean, he's
100%.
I feel like he ate a few other Godzillas. But yeah, you have it, and it's really some of his functions here. And one is like the radiation, and that's a big thing. He has to radiate the radioactive breath that he blows out or shoots out, streams out like plasma. How would he contain that? His energy source, the caloric load, is he using that as a nuclear kind of reactor inside of himself? And the isotopes, has he accumulated this from this waste from the waters to power himself,
he's
right?
Just eating
that's right, yes.
Lots and lots of radioactive tuna.
That's what he is. Well, he's got to eat a lot. He's a big He's probably, I don't know, fairly large. So his caloric intake would be
How many Big Macs?
a lot. Thousands, tens of thousands of Big Macs to just walk, to swim up onto land and to do destruction. That's probably, we're probably talking 100,000 calories per.
So what, that's maybe a whale?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know what the caloric intake
I feel
of
like he
whales
might
are.
chow down on a whale every now and then and be like, all right, I'm feeling good.
yes. You mean he eats the whale? Like what is, yes.
Yes.
But you can make the argument that maybe
He was a whale.
he could have been a whale, or he was powered by
The word
radioactivity.
Gojira, the Gojira,
Okay.
which is the Japanese
Right,
word.
right.
It's a portmanteau of the word for gorilla and whale.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
And there's a story that it was named after a Toho worker, Toho being the studio.
Yes. Yeah. We didn't mention that. Yeah.
And he got the nickname because he was burly like a gorilla and liked to eat whale meat.
right.
But one of the wives of one of the creators said that's in an interview years later. She was like, they just made that up.
Yeah.
That wasn't true.
How it would work. Yeah. So the other thing, and we talked about this in the shrinking episode, was the square cube law, how things proportionally get bigger, that as a body increases its size, its volume grows faster than its surface area. And so what you would have then, you would need some way, you can do the math offline if you like.
No,
Or
can
go
you
back
do
to
that
those show
on
notes.
air?
No, I'm not. Go back to the show notes. It's all in there from the shrinking episode, I believe. But you have animals like a elephant. We think about land animals and things like that. They have this. So you have to compensate. Or you think about a big building. The base is usually bigger than the surface. If you think about its mass and everything. So when you have a animal that large, you have to really rethink about how its bone structure would be and how that would work and the dynamics of that. So really looking at Godzilla, he may be bigger. As he's gotten bigger with the buildings, you start to get to some very hand-wavium situation that you can't even construct that unless you have some different rearrangement of bones, of joint structure when he's jumping around and throwing stuff, like all that wear and tear on these. Elephants don't jump. There's a reason. That's because they're heavy, they're massive, and their bones and joints won't stand up. They could collapse and actually kill themselves or hurt themselves really badly. So they tend not to do that. Or I've never seen an elephant jump. Maybe you guys are looking at me like, you're like,
You don't
Joe,
see-
we actually have in the zoo. We've seen the circus. We've seen elephants jump. So
We're actually going to point to the next video that we're going to show of an elephant jumping.
So it's something to think about as you watch the movies and things like that. And I talked about running, and just that motion would almost be impossible at that size. And for a creature, once he gets super big, there's some fundamental laws that get kind of hand wavy him away.
Does a metaphor need bone structure?
At the Rabbit Hole of Research, yeah.
But like dinosaurs can walk around. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's true.
Those things were huge.
They were, but their bone structure to compensate for that, and no one's saying that they were jumping around.
But no one's
and
saying that they
going, so-
weren't jumping around.
Based on other land animals of size, they were not jumping around. And usually, like a lot of them, like you think of the really big dinosaurs, they had really squat. Like a lot of, if you think of their shape and size, they were very squat to the ground. Their legs were very large and round, proportionate to their bodies. They were large animals, but a lot of that was they had different structure and their bones and things like that.
I feel like the Godzilla from Minus One was the most dinosaur-like
Right.
version of it. Like,
Interesting.
but he did start off smaller in the beginning of the film, and then he grew as they went on. But I think that was also due to the amount of time that passed from the first appearance of him till.
And the testing.
Yeah, it happened in between. There was another test in between, so he gained more radioactive poison.
Radioactive fallout poison. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Radiation poison, I think it's the way you would say it.
I couldn't say that word. I was like, it's a radioactive something.
Yeah. And so walking, I think one of the things they did well was the tail, right? That would act as a counterbalance to weighing it out. And so that's something for that type of stance, almost like a T-Rex, because it has that nice tail that kind of balances itself so it doesn't tip over like a teapot. tip it over.
Some little teapot.
Short and stout.
Why did I know that was going to happen with you? I was waiting for that.
I thought the other thing was its ability to swim and its underwater prowess, because it
clearly lives under the ocean.
So that means
it's
has
amphibious.
Gills or, it has
yes,
gills
I think
or something like that.
gills.
That would help it, and then it comes on land.
Its DNA was split with a frog. That's why.
The ocean frogs.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was
Nick about the ocean.
That
frogs.
was a Jurassic Park reference there. Come on.
Yeah, the Godzilla would need to have maybe some special airbag type organs, because we just said if it's on land, like whales don't come on land. Like they get beached. They usually die pretty fast because their weight just starts crushing them because they lose the buoyancy. So when you're in water, the water buoyancy helps so you can become really big and still maintain this
every
large
time
size.
Godzilla surfaces, there's like lots of bubbles.
Right. Yeah.
Like lots of
So
bubbling,
that's probably,
and then
yeah. I thought he was just gassy.
and then
He had a big whale meal, and he's. But you're right. He would have to to stay submerged. That's easy, but to actually float, you would have to fill up. It's actually the opposite. Instead of outgassing, you would have to take in to actually create more air to float yourself. But he's so dense. We just said that he has to be pretty dense. He has to be bottom heavy to move around on land. That so he must have some specialized thing that he can fill up on air. And
I was always hoping he was just
up.
walking on the bottom of the seafloor.
That's yes.
And he's just, I gotta jump.
I guess if he's tall enough, probably at the shallow part.
Well, when he comes on
like the
land,
shelf,
definitely,
you could just start walking
yeah.
up, and you would but not the bottom of the ocean. He's not that big.
Again, this is all what I hope he was doing. He's just chilling at the bottom, just a whale.
But yeah, so he would have that.
So what are Godzilla's pronouns?
God and Zilla.
I was going to touch upon the sexual prowess of our good friend Godzilla, because he seems like a solo fella. There was a son of Godzilla or something, right?
Yes,
So,
and there's a cartoon in the 70s that I want to talk about. He had a nephew. How does he have a nephew? I don't know.
Yes.
Didn't they have
But originally...
eggs in the really bad Matthew Broderick version?
Oh, I haven't watched that in a long time, but I think you're right. I think there were eggs.
They laid eggs all over the city.
Wasn't that a plot point that Godzilla was female in that one?
Maybe, but it could have been like Genesis.
It could have been.
So that's like asexual reproduction. That's in reptiles and things. So they don't actually have to have sex to actually have. They just have almost like clones.
But originally, Godzilla was gender neutral. So in the original movie, Godzilla's an it.
Okay.
And that treats Godzilla as a natural disaster, which they have a lot of in Japan.
Right.
We talked about the trauma from the war, but also
tsunamis
in Japan, earthquakes and tsunamis and typhoons and
usually water related too. Like you have this water to land
on the ocean,
destruction. So Godzilla also going from water to land. You have this continuing destruction of a tsunami or typhoon, things like that. So
coming
that's really
from the ocean. Yep. So that's very.
And a typhoon is, I might be wrong, but it's just a hurricane that comes out of the Pacific instead of the Atlantic. Right?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. I'm not a meteorologist.
Later, Godzilla became a he, as it was seen more as a metaphor for the U.S. nuclear weapons, which were developed by men.
Right. Yes.
I had forgotten about the Matthew Broderick.
With fedoras,
I put that on the other day with Hank Azaria. You don't know who he is?
No.
From The Simpsons.
Oh.
Voice actor. Yeah. It was one of those roles where I'm like, oh, I know his voice. And then later in life, I had to find out who he was.
Yeah. But then I also thought about we touched on it, the ecosystem of how would you support a creature of that size in what's it eating, what's it doing? Or is it like we touched upon the radioactivity is powering it? There's other ways, but that's something that you never see it eating Big Macs or people. Like it doesn't really. Does it eat? It doesn't eat?
Yeah, sometimes.
Does it eat sometimes? Yeah.
Sometimes it'll eat people.
In the Matthew Broderick version,
people.
It eats. They set out a bunch of fish for it in the middle of the city.
Oh, there it is, like a tribute.
It was more or less just trying to lure it out. Again, I watched that one recently for this episode.
So then I was thinking of the kaiju in there, and Natalie, you mentioned the thing about the gore. But one of the things I thought of, out of Japan, was Attack on Titan.
Yep.
That the Titans, I'm not sure if you've seen that anime or manga, but it's these giant human Titans. They like eat people. Like usually they swallow them whole, or they chew them. So it is extremely gory and bloody, but they would fall into this kind of giant monster and some sort of threat against humanity. That's how they were built up in the episode. So I thought about that one coming out of also from Japan, and that's this different take on it. Not necessarily they are monsters, but they were human. Just throw that out there.
I ended up going down the hole of Pacific Rim. They ended up having humans make mechs that are to try to fight these giant beasts, and it's what Pacific Rim? They had them come out of the ocean as well.
Yeah, they were came out of the ocean. Yeah, usually have that. So
I think it's because the ocean's able to hide big things. And
Cloverfield, that one, they came out the ocean too. That's how it started, because it smacked ahead of the Statue of Liberty down the road.
Yep.
So Northwest Indiana, J. Adam Forster just made the region rat kaiju. So he designed that for us in our region. Natalie's looking at the poster.
I do not live in Indiana.
But yeah, you don't have you deal with region rats though.
Occasionally.
Yes, those alley rats are. I lived in Chicago for a little bit.
So I was thinking that I do feel like having these giant beasts is a major thing in a lot of Asian culture, because the Power Rangers came from it as well, which
Ultraman
always dealt with giant creatures, giant beasts, given from outer space or from the sea itself. It's always something mecha.
Well, who else you're going to fight? And I think I went down that was the history of giant monsters, because as we said, even in America there were giant monster movies, but just you go back, there was this kind of history of that. You think of mythology, and so you had a lot of different Greek mythology creatures, the typhoon or the Leviathan from the Hebrew Bible, this kind of sea monster,
ice giants.
One of our favorites, the Epic of Gilgamesh, that comes up. I think this season we have not talked about, but it had a giant guardian of the cedar forest, right? So we had this Homer's Odyssey. You had the Cyclops in there, so you had that. And then you get into early novels, the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, 1870 by Jules Verne, The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. And H.G. Wells had a few, like the Food of the Gods, The War of the Worlds, giant Martians coming down. And that scientific, early sci-fi, you start getting into giant things and manipulating nature to create something else. And so you had this, and then you had like I said, the Lost World, King Kong, so you had this kind of history of humans going up against something bigger. And that, once again, the allegory then is about either our hubris kind of going up against nature, or tampering with nature in a way that it becomes uncontrollable, kind of
makes us feel small.
This puts us back in our place somewhat. That was,
it's very much, this is bigger than you. Yeah. This is meant to make you feel as small as you really are.
And then we had in 1954 in America, Them, which was the giant ant. So it was it was testing out in the Southwest, this similar thing, radiation fallout, and it made the ants really big and hungry for human flesh.
Hungry.
And probably, I wonder if the Hays Code was in effect in 1954. Code we talked about in the war episode. It was all about kind of these rules that regulated what could be shown in movies. And so gore, things like that weren't allowed to be there. You had to have 1 foot on the floor, and potential sex scenes, no racial slurs, no slandering priest or
This is Hollywood.
This was Hollywood, yeah. So you had that. You had this for movies to fit an audience. You had to also, like you mentioned, censorship in that was all. American movies were being censored also.
Absolutely. But the American military and Hollywood work together.
That's right. Exactly.
They always have.
We had all the propaganda films.
Absolutely. I want to point out
you've been pointing at me for a little bit. I'm like getting nervous. Shut the hell up so I can get my point in.
I have to say, first guest to actually follow their list all the way through.
I know, I like it.
The military in Godzilla is not the military. So it's the Japanese Self-Defense Force is what in those early Godzilla movies. And they're in all of them, right? They're in uniforms, they have guns, but they are not the Japanese military because after World War II, Japan decided that it would not legally be allowed to have a military.
Right, yeah. Was that part of the treaty to the end of the war, or was that a self-imposed?
I think it was self-imposed.
Look what we've done.
Before World War II, Japanese society, and it was dominated by the military. It was a military state. And the war absolutely changed the way society dealt with that. They went from a state dominated by the military to a democracy that had legally renounced the right to wage war or maintain a military. It was just a few years that happened. So this was a huge transformation, and that in the movies, you see them struggling with that issue because they largely just embraced anti-militarism, and definitely they were anti-nuclear weapon.
Right.
But they quietly rearmed themselves and created the Japanese Self-Defense Forces. Quasi-military, they could only use weapons in self-defense, which is why they're going up against Godzilla.
Right.
But it was also largely absent from their post-war cinema. They didn't show it. It wasn't. They didn't have a public relations department until 1993.
So with the absence of the military, I believe they show that in Minus One. They ended up creating this force of ex-military.
I mean, that was right after the war, though, yes.
And then they were looking for a plane, and they were like, well, you're not going to find one of these.
Right, yes, absolutely.
But
but it is notable that the defense forces do show up in the Godzilla movies because it wasn't across the board.
Was there a
Japanese movies
at the
time?
If you know this or want to speculate, but was that also by having a giant monster attack the homeland? Let's say the Japanese homeland, that they were totally unprepared because they went this totally pacifist route. And was this kind of a nod to that? Oh, look what we are exposed to. If this Godzilla is now this allegory for all these things, it could be an allegory for we've left ourselves open to attack, easy attack, like we're easy pickings.
Maybe
right?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
No.
I think if you look at the Godzilla movies across the decades, though, the thing that they're struggling with in this monster changes. Godzilla versus Hedorah, the trash monster. It's all about pollution.
And their weapons never work against it.
No,
they never do.
So even if they did have that military force, it wouldn't work.
They never, also in the movies, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm looking at my list of all the Godzilla movies, and I must admit, I haven't, I'm maybe 50%, I don't know, I'm not going to lie to anyone. But did they ever call for outside military help?
Yes.
So that's one of the things, like, kind of, you have this creature, and to be fair, like, even in American monster movies, we usually don't call in, I think, Independence Day. I'm trying to think of movies where we actually went out and said, hey, we're being attacked, can you help us out? Usually it's like, we're going to fix it ourselves. But I was wondering. The
Return of Godzilla in 1984, it's the opposite of that. Godzilla's there, and the Americans want to come in and drop a nuclear weapon on it, and the Soviets want to come in and also use their weapons on it, and Japan's standing in the middle of them going, no, you're not bringing your bombs here to us. No. And there's all these scenes of the diplomats talking where the Japanese leaders are going, we don't want either one of you here.
I was talking about the list, so I have it. I do have lists of the history of Godzilla movies organized by era. And I thought it's just very interesting. So like the Toho Studios era from 1954 to 1975, there were like 15 movies in there. So you had Godzilla Raise Again, King Kong versus Godzilla in 62, Martha versus Godzilla. There was a bunch of verses in 64. Ghidorah, the three-headed monster in 64.
That was a really good one.
Invasion of Astro Monster. I just watched that, the Ghidorah one. I always think of MF Doom, King Ghidorah, that album. If you haven't listened to it, go check it out. Son of Godzilla in 67. Destroy All Monsters, 68. All Monsters Attack, 69, Godzilla versus Hedorah, Godzilla versus Gigan, Godzilla versus Megalon, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. I'd watched that like last year sometime, and then the Terror of Mechagodzilla in 75. So you had this like little span of all these kind of, and probably some of these are fairly cheesy. Like you don't, I mean, watch it if you have nothing else to do.
I find that even when it's cheesy, maybe because it's cheesy, when Godzilla appears either out of the ocean or over the hill, it just fills my heart with joy.
They're fun movies. They are. Like, at the end of the day, I enjoy just throwing it on. And
something I learned about all this was the original Godzilla suit was like this really weird outfit, and the actor, I think it was two actors, and one was like younger and one was older, and they would put this suit on, but it was like made out of concrete and plastic, and I guess like they had to, you only could wear it for so much time before you like passed out from heat exhaustion,
and they would just drenched.
Yeah, they would have to dump out the suit because it was just filled with sweat, like daily. And then they had, then they made like just Godzilla feet. So that's why a lot of scenes it's just the leg parts kicking around, because they would just wear the bottom part of it because it was so hot and exhausting that they really couldn't like wear the entire bodysuit and do it for the first Godzilla. It probably changed as they went on, but you do have the way Godzilla looks. It's probably because they were trying to get this outfit. And like I said, some movies he just looks really silly and fun. It's like he's really...
You could tell it's just some guy in a suit.
Yeah, and then you get the reboot then 10 years later, the era from 84 to 95. When they become a little darker, you have improved special effects. So the Return of Godzilla, which Natalie was just talking about. Godzilla versus Biollante, Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. And that's the true, probably MF Doom reference there.
Oh, yeah.
In 91, so that would line up a little bit better. Godzilla versus Martha, 92, which I thought Martha was older. I think so that was interesting. It wasn't as old as I thought.
There is a Mothra versus Godzilla in 64.
Okay, so there was. You're right.
That's the one with the string.
Right. Yeah, okay. And then that's right. And then the baby Martha was in the Ghidorah, the three-headed monster in 64. Yeah. Godzilla versus the Mecha Godzilla 2, Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, and Godzilla versus Destroyer in 1995. So yeah, that was in the Millennium era that went from 99 to 2004. I'm not going to read all these off. There's just a ton of movies.
So do you have the runtime to watch all of them in a marathon?
I do not.
I don't either.
Joe, come on. I thought you'd have this backed up for me. I guess we'll have to put it in the footnotes.
I know, we'll have to put it in there.
Because yeah, I do feel like I watched a lot of the more earlier days of Godzilla, but I feel like it's also making a resurgence in media now. Because we've had 3 Godzilla movies recently, I think. Godzilla vs. Kong. No, 4, because Godzilla vs. Kong. And then also Godzilla Minus One. And I believe he also had a video game or 2 come out as well. Maybe.
So I in a time of me rambling there, I've calculated this in my brain. No, I didn't. Sorry. That would be amazing. I used the Googles to help us out here. But the total runtime for all Godzilla movies is 4,059 minutes.
How many hours is
Which
that?
is approximately 67 hours and 39 minutes. So
how many days is that?
You knocked that out in a week.
That's a lot of days. Let me think.
It's my thing to always try to stump Joe.
I know there's 2.82 days.
That's nothing.
No, it's just a long run.
It's a weekend. It's a weekend.
It's a weekend, yes.
It's an extended weekend.
Yes. That's it. Long weekend. Yeah, we'll do it.
I'm down.
Let's go. So yeah, you're right. And then there was all these kind of spin-offs and things like that. And was there a Godzilla on American soil? Like that ever happened? He's like
the Matthew Broderick.
Matthew Broderick.
Is that the one you're talking? Which one is that? That's Godzilla.
That's 98.
It's just called Godzilla.
No, it's just called Godzilla
97?
98. Okay. Godzilla 98 had the reboot by TriStar.
Yeah.
TriStar Pictures is on my list. That's right. These are the ones not produced by Toho Studios.
And then what the
Planet? There was a Planet of Monsters in 2017. That was an animated trilogy. That was a Toho Netflix combo.
Yep.
But then you had King Kong versus Godzilla. Those kind of. adaptations.
But can we talk about the 1978 Hanna-Barbera cartoon?
Champing at the bit for that one here.
This was my introduction to Godzilla.
I remember this one, but go ahead, yes. Yeah.
I could sing the theme song.
Go for
badly.
it. Yes, we want to hear it on a Rabbit Hole of Research. Natalie, go for it.
Up from the depths, 30 stories high. Godzilla and Godzuki. Godzilla. Oh.
Bravo.
Here it is.
Purely from memory. Although I have discovered that all of this cartoon is on YouTube. They,
really?
They chop every episode into 3 different YouTube videos.
So you got it.
But it premiered on NBC in September of 1978.
Yes.
And it follows the adventures of a team of scientists on a scientific research vessel named the Calico. And maybe that's why I loved it, because it was a cartoon about scientists. And I was like, oh, I want to be a scientist on a boat.
Yeah.
Are you a scientist on a boat?
No.
Oh. I'm so sorry. I was like...
I when I was a child, I thought I wanted to be a marine biologist that studied the Bermuda Triangle. I thought that was going to be a really good career.
Yeah. They made that triangle seem a lot more dangerous.
They did.
Quicksand,
they really did.
Bermuda Triangle.
I'm still afraid of quicksand. I don't know what you're talking about.
That would just be a daily threat.
I really thought I was going to come in contact with quicksand at some point.
I'm also pretty sure I might combust at some point. Just up in flames.
All right there, Human Torch. A future episode there. Nick's giving a little...
So I
wasn't going to flat out say it. Jeez.
No.
Yeah. I like it there.
Anyway, Godzuki was the comic relief.
Okay.
The nephew.
It's the nephew. Okay, so he had some
who flew badly, but
so that means that there was other Godzillas that had
kids. But not in this cartoon.
Because they had to get a nephew, you got to have a brother or sister that then has progeny. So there's
but it's like
Godzilla.
Donald Duck doesn't have kids but has nephews.
He has a sister, though.
He has to have a brother. You have a sister or brother, then you can have nephews.
But you don't see the sister or brother ever.
She actually came out recently.
Yeah.
Donald Duck's sister?
Yeah.
Huh.
Oh, there you go.
And he has an uncle, so you know.
It's Scrooge, right? Isn't that his uncle?
Scrooge is his uncle,
yeah. Scrooge.
But,
there's like a duck family out there.
Yeah.
Doing stuff. It's like you're famous, bring your less famous.
Let them have their own private lives.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of...
I thought you just leave them behind. Yeah. You're just like, I don't want to deal with that.
Or that. Yeah, but if Godzilla's romping around with his nephew, someone's got to keep terrorizing the people of Japan. So that's the...
But the thing about this Godzilla, he's the good guy.
Okay,
he always comes and saves the scientist, which is clearly why I loved him.
It's like good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
So there's got to be like the...
There's a quote from the guy, Barbera, Mr. Barbera, had a quote. I don't have it here.
Hanna-Barbera?
Yeah. Hanna was another person, I think. Barbera was... Anyway.
There were two. Yeah,
he was like, they got the license from Toho to make this cartoon, and they were going to try to make it like the original movie themes, and then they realized that was too dark for children.
What?
And so
Who would have thought that?
So then he was like, so we had to change that around, and it ended up being this. And it's like an official quote, and he goes, and it was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was possible. Why not?
So, but I loved it, and I had a plastic Godzilla. And in this one, Godzilla did not spew radioactive plasma. It was just fire out of his mouth. And he had heat beams out of his eyes, like Superman. But my plastic Godzilla had a switch on its neck where the flame tongue would stick out. And then also a button on his arm inexplicably that you could push and it would shoot his hand.
There was always I had toys like that.
It would just shoot his fist across the room.
There was had a big robot thing, and it had a shooting...
A Sentinel?
I don't know what it... No.
How
it was
is that a good weapon?
Or somebody like that. It was just a fist that you would lose.
It's one shot, and then you don't have a hand.
Yes, yeah. You can recall it. I don't know.
I thought lizards regrow limbs.
Godzilla definitely does regeneration.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Like, the list of powers that Godzilla has, hot damn, it ranges.
It does. I think it
does, yeah.
Different movies, he has a different skill set. That's why I think maybe they're just different Godzilla. They are like
Godzilla-sized?
Yeah. Godzilla.
Godzilla?
Is it Greek or is it? It's not. It's
Godzillas.
Japanese, so probably Godzillas. Yeah.
Godzillas. Yeah.
I'm not going down that.
No,
rabbit
let's
hole.
go down. So
Sorry.
let's get people writing about how angry they are at Earth.
But maybe there's multiple Godzillas of various sizes, of various abilities.
Yep.
And there's a little family, a community of Godzillas there.
Just all
Living on the
high-fiving at
bottom
the
of the
bottom.
ocean.
That's right, yeah. I mean, they
somewhere.
don't have to. They may never come up. That's unless they run out of food or they're angry or Earth needs
Accident.
protecting. Yeah. Hold on. Let me go up and set people down here.
If you go off of the Godzilla vs. Kong, they have the hollow Earth theory in there.
There's an Apple TV series.
That's
with,
right. The King of Monsters with Kurt Russell and his son Wyatt
yes,
Russell. Yeah.
Yes. And they do the whole hollow Earth thing
Watched
in
like
that
the first
also.
few episodes. I just couldn't get into it.
I watched the whole thing.
Oh,
I
did you?
really
Was
enjoyed it.
Was it good? Okay. Maybe I had to go back to it. It felt slow. Like we were watching it and but I like this multiple thing. The ocean's really deep and there's a lot of unexplored area in there. And this was Shauna McGuire. She has a series, the Rolling in the Deep series, where kind of it explores, have we met the apex creature that lives in the ocean? Because you could develop a whole nother ecosystem. You could have very intelligent life. You could have a mermaid, quote unquote mermaids, things like that. We
the
haven't
city
seen.
of Atlanta?
The city of Atlantis.
No,
not
it's Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Atlanta, Georgia does not exist. I don't know what you keep trying to tell me. That's
I think it's Atlanta.
All of the myths and things that come out of the ocean, you just have to think sailors have seen some shit.
That's right, yeah.
And they might not know what they saw, and maybe they saw part of it, and maybe they doubted themselves after
Maybe
they
they're
saw
just
it, and maybe they were just drunk.
what I mean.
A lot of rum.
What wasn't it a narwhal that they thought was a mermaid or something?
Mermaids were
manatee?
right. I mean,
manatee, that's what it was.
Yeah. Siren, the siren calls, things like that. No.
And like those anglerfish, I guarantee they started some myths.
Yeah, probably.
Those things are terrifying.
They are, yeah. And there was one that I guess is in the news that was on the surface and made some journey up and
It was so
was
tiny.
kind of hanging out. Yeah, until
Just a tiny little guy.
Yeah, so.
Fits in your hand.
All right, well, let's.
What were you drinking
Now,
tonight, Joe?
You got, I was going to see if our guests had anything, any
Oh.
last thoughts. You're just jumping right.
I thought that's where we were going.
We are going there,
Oh,
but I'd
geez,
like
look.
to be courteous, be a little. Natalie, any last words? That's because George is not here. If people didn't notice that, George is not
Who?
here tonight with us. Yeah. That's because is there a Kaiju in Twilight?
I don't think there is. She stays out of the episodes without the Twilight's references.
We'll hear it on the mini episode. But yeah, Natalie, sorry.
No.
As we give our co-host a little hard time. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. We can go to, what are you drinking over there?
Tonight, I got Choose Your Champ. It's by Voodoo Ranger.
Voodoo Ranger. Yeah.
And then I also have my Liquid Death Convicted Melon.
Not sponsored yet.
Come on.
Natalie, what do you got?
I have Liquid
Our
Death.
guests are now drinking Liquid Death. Still
Rest
not
in
sponsored.
Peach.
And I have a Son of Juice by Maplewood. I haven't had a Son of Juice in a while. I like Maplewood. They're right here in Chicago. So
Yeah.
I'm keeping it local. Yeah. I think that's it. Let's thank Natalie again for coming down to the basement studio to talk about Kaiju and Godzilla in particular. Anything to plug? Yeah.
I don't have anything to plug.
I'm so sorry.
Actually,
Oh,
I am a docent for Pizza City USA. We're going
I
to
wanna go on a
start
tour.
our next season in May.
Yeah.
So we take you to the best pizza places in Chicago, 4 pizza styles in 3 hours.
Oh, yeah.
That's my
I
comment
talk
for-
all about the history of pizza and about the restaurants we go to and the different styles of pizza. And
If you ever need a taste tester, let me know.
Go
I'm
on
always
the tour.
What?
Go on the tour.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
get to taste pizza, right?
you do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
That's what I
we just
said.
do it.
Get a
Let's
lot
do it.
of
Rabbit
pizza.
Hole of Research on the road.
That's what
We're
I
there.
just said.
We got it. We'll put the links in the show notes
Sure.
for this. And so, yeah, check that out. That is nice. There it is. So, see?
Boom,
Nick,
boom.
that wasn't. So, yeah. You got me, Joe.
You got Nick.
We got Nick. We have our guest, Natalie.
And we went down a hole to the bottom of the sea.
Giant Kaiju-sized hole.
Bye-bye.
Stay big out there, people.